expenditures of $11.5 billion. Now that wasn't all just on election-related expenditures, but here is what the Funders Committee for Civic Participation pledges to spend its money on. Civic engagement. Who could be against that? Expanding the electorate. When they're talking about expanding the electorate, they're not talking about voter registration drives. They're talking about how can we literally manufacture voters from people who really don't have any interest in voting. And how can we do that most easily without having what they call voter suppression is anything that would protect the integrity of the outcome. Protecting voting rights, political participation, training young leaders, strategic litigation, that's Mark Elias and all the plethora of left-wing litigation groups, research and narrative. They invest money in how to tell a narrative, and underserved communities. Their idea of an underserved community are pockets of people that if they can get their votes at all, they'll vote 90 to 95% for the Democrats. And so that is an example. It's one example of how they use all of this, and they're doing it with 501c3 money. Charitable contributions. Now remember, charities are prohibited from engaging in partisan campaign intervention and in spending $1 on anything that has the intent or the effect of partisan campaign intervention. But that doesn't stop them. They use these magic words to cover up that they're really engaged in political campaign activity. And of course, the IRS does nothing. But they don't just do it through institutions, through all those foundations. Someone made reference to it today, and we all talk about George Soros. Let me tell you, George Soros is just one of their billionaires. I want to make sure you know some of the others who have been funding what they've done to our country. Pierre Omidyar. Anybody know who that is? He's the eBay guy. And starting in 2014, he created something called the Omidyar Nexus. One of the things he created was something called the Democracy Fund. He put $250 million into the Democracy Fund. I want to just say this. Whenever anybody starts telling you that they're worried about our democracy or protect democracy or they've got democracy in their name, those are not friends of ours. Because we live in a constitutional republic, not a democracy. They want it to be a democracy, to change our founders' intent. In 2020, the Democracy Fund received $350 million, $250 million of it was for him, and spent $276 million. And one of the organizations that he helped to found was something called the Center for Tech and Civic Life. Anybody ever heard of the Center for Tech and Civic Life? Enter billionaire two, Mark Zuckerberg. In 2020, Mark Zuckerberg and his wife gave almost $500 million, $415 million to two leftist groups. One of them, CTCL, the Center for Tech and Civic Life. The other, an organization called the Center for Election Innovation and Research, CEIR. That money flowed from these C3s into targeted election offices and battleground states to use the election offices to gin up the Democratic turnout. There are lots of reports about this. You can read about them. This is all 501c3 money. Not a dime, all deductible. It went from the Zuckerberg and Chan Foundation to the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, and from the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, then they directed it to all of these election offices. It changed the outcome of the 2020 election. It certainly changed it certainly changed Wisconsin. I believe it also changed the outcome in Georgia. It changed the outcome in Pennsylvania because of the money that, in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia election office budget annually was $11 million. They received from this initiative in what we came to call Zuckerbucks, $12 million. More than they received than the government funding for that office. And the ostensible purpose of the Zuckerbucks was to help the election offices survive and get through COVID. You know how much they spent on PPE? Even NPR, no friend of ours, said it was less than 2% of the funding. And if you haven't seen the movie Rigged that David Bossie and Citizens United put together, you should watch that. It explains in very clear detail, based on their 990s and government records, what they did. 24 states have now restricted private money flowing into election offices. But it's not enough. Enter billionaire number 3, Bill Gates. He is now funding something called the Audacious Project, which has given $80 million to, guess who? Center for Tech and Civic Life. And they are going to target election offices to help them be better election offices. And who is the leader of the Center for Tech and Civic Life? Tiana Epps Johnson. She's an Obama Foundation Fellow, and she is the founder and CEO of the Center for Tech and Civic Life. And they are in the process of funding some of the $80 million through this U.S. Alliance for Election Excellence. It is being managed by the Center for Tech and Civic Life, but it also has partners, CEIR, U.S. Digital Response, Center for Civic Design. Many of you may have seen in your states the materials that come from this civic participation initiative or voter participation, voter information center. They sent out 25 million absentee ballot applications in 2020. They did this. They sent out millions in Virginia in 2021. They literally flood the system with absentee ballot applications to get to targeted voters to try to get them to send in their absentee ballots applications so they can vote by mail. But I could go on about all their partners. But in November of this year, there were 10 county and municipal election offices that were announced as to be recipients of these grants. And here's the list, the first wave of recipients in all these particular states. But one of the things I want to show you is really important here, because here they are, they've identified all of these counties and all of these local election offices, and they're just getting started in November of last year. They announced it back in the spring. And we started organizing citizens groups around the country through the Election Integrity Network, teaching them how to do FOIA requests and open records requests, and how to be watching what's going on at their local election offices, which we didn't have a chance to do in 2020 because we didn't find out about the Zuckerberg billions, $500 million, until August or September of 2020. And now they said that they wanted to make sure that it wasn't just one funder, so that's why it's going through the Audacious Project, but that's primarily Bill and Melinda Gates. But so you see these, they've just gotten started on saying, oh, we're going to give you grants. And then the counties are then supposed to use that money to pay them to have one of their various partners come in and they require that they are to receive the U.S. Alliance proprietary non-public information about voters, about the voting procedures, about the voting equipment, so that citizens aren't entitled to that information. But if you're a Center for Excellence, an election office, and you get a grant, Well, part of what you agreed to is turning over data and information that the public isn't entitled to so that they can help that office be a better office. But one of the things that's happened that they didn't count on is citizens fighting back. We have a weekly call with about 80 to 100 people every week who dial in. It's called the Citizens Research Project. And we are teaching people, and we want to do more of this, about how to go to their local election office and find out if any of this money is coming to their local election office. And you see these strike-throughs? These are from the original list that the U.S. Alliance announced. These are counties and local election offices that local citizens have gotten their counties to say, to change their minds and say, no, we're not going to accept this money. We're not going to accept this. Now, they're still fighting about it, but it shows the power of a few citizens who are watching what's going on. But not mentioned in the original announcement, which now makes us wonder, are they going to keep making public announcements? Because they haven't made any since November. But we know that in January, DeKalb County, Georgia, was awarded a $2 million grant in violation of the Georgia statute that was adopted in 2021 that bans local election offices in Georgia from receiving private money. So the legislature has tightened that restriction, and the state board is investigating, but it just shows you they have no compunction about violating the law. Because what they want is they want to be in those election offices, and they're doing it with billionaire money flowing through 501c3s into the election offices to gin up Democratic turnout. Now, not to just take one little side trip, I could give a whole hour to you about the Biden executive order that he issued in March of 2021, in which he ordered every federal agency to have its own voter registration plan and its own voter turnout plan. And members of Congress had been requesting copies of those plans, which were due to the White House in 2021, but which they have steadfastly refused to provide to any member of Congress. And we know that part of the executive order included using our tax dollars to make grants to organizations approved by, guess who? Susan Rice in the White House. She's the one in charge of the program. Basically what the left has done since 2013 is they have changed the electoral system in state after state after state, with billions of dollars flowing through 501c3 charities. They've changed the way we vote, the way ballots are counted, the way they've waged lawfare to overturn legislative enactments, and it all started well before 2020. So when you hear all this, you kind of go, oh my gosh, what do we do about it? Well, I'm a big believer in, I don't believe in sitting around griping about things unless you want to try to find a way to fix it. And so what we have done, and I say we, I literally, through the Conservative Partnership Institute and now with others, the Virginia Institute for Public Policy, which gave us what we call the Virginia model, which was developed and used in 2021, I think to great effect in Virginia, where we have a very strong citizens coalition and local task forces all over the state. We now have those state coalitions in 22 states. We have dozens and dozens of local election integrity task forces. We have 9 national working groups on everything from cleaning voter rolls to protecting vulnerable voters to understanding voting technology to fighting ranked choice voting. I moderate a weekly call. I always have between 120 and 160 people every Wednesday talking about cleaning voter rolls. It's pretty phenomenal. It's pretty inspirational. But these are all volunteers. And we've published the Citizens Guide to Building the Election Integrity Net Infrastructure. If you want to know more, that's our website, www.whoscounting.us. But I want to turn to the main thing I want to talk about today for us.